Money has a way of revealing people's true colors. In my family's case, it exposed decades of manipulation, favoritism, and cruelty that I've been too blind to see. But sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom to finally stand up for what matters most. I'm Emily Chen, 35, successful tech executive, and proud mother to my 12-year-old son Michael. He's brilliant, kind, and happens to be on the autism spectrum. While some see his unique way of viewing the world as a gift, my parents have always treated his autism as a shameful family secret. Growing up in Silicon Valley's elite circles, appearance was everything to my parents. Our sprawling Atherton mansion, my mother's designer wardrobe, my father's luxury cars, all carefully curated to project an image of old money and status. My younger sister Grace fit perfectly into their world with her perfect grades, perfect looks, and perfect social graces. Then there was me, the awkward one who preferred coding to cotillions. But I made up for my social shortcomings by excelling in business and tech. By 30, I was already a VP at one of the Valley's top firms, making the kind of money that finally earned a grudging respect from my status-obsessed parents. When I married David, a brilliant but modest software engineer, they were less than thrilled. "You could have done so much better," my mother sighed at our engagement party, eyeing his off-the-rack suit with barely concealed disdain. But David was everything I'd ever wanted: kind, brilliant, and completely unconcerned with social climbing or status games. The first cracks in my parents' perfectly polished facade appeared around the time Michael was born. He was different from the start, incredibly focused on patterns and numbers, less interested in typical social interactions. The diagnosis came when he was 3, level 1 autism spectrum disorder. "You need to fix this," my mother hissed after a particularly difficult family dinner where Michael had become overwhelmed by all the noise and stimulation. "He's embarrassing us in front of everyone. What will people think?" I tried explaining that autism wasn't something to fix, it was part of who Michael was. But my parents remained convinced it was somehow my fault, a result of that strange man I'd married and my unconventional parenting. David was my rock through it all, helping me see Michael's unique gifts and standing up to my parents' cruel comments. But we lost him in a car accident when Michael was 7, leaving me to navigate both single parenthood and my family's increasing hostility alone. The irony? Right around the time David died, my parents' perfect world started crumbling. Years of living beyond their means, failed investment schemes, and the 2008 financial crisis had left them drowning in debt. They came to me in tears, facing foreclosure on their beloved mansion and the collapse of their social standing. "Please, Emily," my father begged, showing me statements revealing over $2 million in various debts. "We'll lose everything. Your mother won't survive the shame." I could have said no. Maybe I should have. But decades of conditioning to be the good daughter kicked in. I agreed to help, quietly paying off their debts month by month while they maintained their lavish lifestyle. The only condition was that they treat Michael with more respect. For a while, things seemed to improve. They included Michael in family events, even bragging about his extraordinary mathematical abilities to their friends. I started to hope that maybe, just maybe, they were finally changing. Then came their 40th wedding anniversary party last month. They'd spared no expense, renting out the Crystal Ballroom at the Fairmont, hiring a live orchestra, flying in rare orchids from Thailand. The Bay Area's elite were all there, dressed in their finest. Michael was having a good day. He'd been practicing his social skills, eager to show his grandparents how well he could handle formal events now. I'd gotten him a custom-tailored suit, coached him on proper etiquette, and he was trying so hard to make them proud. Everything went smoothly until dinner. Michael became fascinated by the geometric patterns in the crystal chandelier above our table and started sharing facts about sacred geometry and mathematical ratios. His voice got louder with excitement as he explained the connections he saw. I watched my mother's face transform from forced politeness to barely concealed horror as nearby guests turned to listen. Before I could intervene, she stood up abruptly, wine sloshing in her glass. "Enough," she snapped. "This is exactly why we can't have him at important events. He's making a scene and embarrassing the entire family." The room fell silent. Michael's face crumpled in confusion and hurt. My father wouldn't meet my highs, but I could see him nodding in agreement with my mother's outburst. "He's not like normal children," my mother continued, her voice carrying across the stunned ballroom. "We've tried to be patient, Emily, but we can't keep pretending. He's an embarrassment to the Chen family name. From now on, he's not welcome at family functions. We have our reputation to think about." I felt something snap inside me. All those years of trying to earn their approval, of making excuses for their behavior, of literally paying their bills while they treated my son like a shameful secret, it all crystallized into perfect clarity. I stood up slowly, my voice steady despite the rage coursing through my veins. "Michael, sweetheart, please go wait with Aunt Grace for a moment. Mom, Dad, we need to talk. Now." I led them to a private alcove off the main ballroom, my hands shaking as I pulled out my phone. Without a word, I opened my financial tracking app and showed them the screen. "See this? $2.4 million. That's how much of your debt I've paid off over the last 5 years. Every month, I've been transferring money to cover your mortgage, your credit cards, your failed investments. I've been keeping you afloat while you continued living your expensive lie whole life." The color drained from their faces as I scrolled through page after page of transfers and payments. They'd known I was helping, but I don't think they'd realized the full extent. "Emily," my father started, his voice uncertain. "We're grateful, of course, but you have to understand about Michael." "No," I cut him off. "You need to understand. I'm done. The monthly payments stop today. I've already called the bank to cancel all future transfers. You can either accept Michael exactly as he is, or you can figure out how to pay your own bills." My mother gripped my father's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his sleeve. "You wouldn't dare. We're your parents. You can't just." "Watch me." I turned on my heel and walked back to the ballroom, head held high. I found Michael with Grace, who had tears in her eyes. She'd obviously heard everything. Unlike our parents, she'd always been kind to Michael, seeing past his differences to the amazing person he was. "Come on, Michael," I said, taking his hand. "We're going home. Grace, you're welcome to come visit us anytime. But I think Mom and Dad need some time to figure out their priorities." As we walked out of the Fairmont that night, Michael looked up at me with those wise eyes that saw so much more than people realized. "They don't like the way my brain works, do they?" I stopped and knelt down to his level, making sure he could see the truth in my eyes. "Some people don't understand that different isn't wrong. It's their loss, not yours. Your brain is amazing exactly the way it is." He considered this, then nodded. "Like how Euler's number is irrational but essential to understanding natural growth patterns?" I smiled, my heart swelling with love for this extraordinary child. "Exactly like that." The next few days passed in a blur of angry calls and text messages from my parents. They swung between threats and begging, trying every manipulation tactic they'd ever used on me. But something had fundamentally shifted inside me that night at the anniversary party. Their words couldn't touch me anymore. I watched through social media as the carefully constructed facade began to crumble. They started quietly canceling their country club memberships. The luxury cars disappeared from their driveway. My mother's designer shopping sprees came to an abrupt halt. The first notice of foreclosure arrived at my parents' house exactly 3 weeks after the anniversary party. Grace called to tell me, her voice tight with worry. "They're in complete denial, Emily. Mom's still getting her weekly massages and Dad just booked another golf retreat. It's like they think you'll cave if they just wait long enough." I sighed, watching through my home office window as Michael worked on his latest robotics project in the backyard. He'd been thriving since we'd stopped attending stressful family functions, his confidence growing without the weight of my parents' constant criticism. "They need to understand this isn't a negotiating tactic," I told Grace. "I'm done enabling their toxic behavior." The next morning, my mother showed up unannounced at my office, dressed in her usual channel suit and dripping in jewelry. My assistant tried to stop her, but she'd always been good at bulldozing past people's boundaries. "Emily, this little tantrum has gone on long enough," she announced, settling into the chair across from my desk as if she owned it. "Your father and I have been patient, but now you're just being childish." I kept my voice calm and professional, the same tone I used in difficult board meetings. "This isn't a tantrum, Mother. This is me finally setting healthy boundaries. You publicly humiliated my son and banned him from family events. Actions have consequences." She waved her hand dismissively. "We were just being honest. Anyone can see the boy isn't normal. If you put him in that special school we recommended years ago. Michael is exactly who he's meant to be." I cut her off. "And he's thriving. Did you know he just won the regional science fair? His project on algorithmic pattern recognition is being reviewed by Stanford's AI department. That's nice, she said in the same tone she used to describe the neighbor's garden gnomes. But surely you can see how his peculiarities reflect poorly on the family. We have a certain position to maintain. I pulled up my banking app and turned the screen toward her. Speaking of positions to maintain, how are you planning to make next month's mortgage payment? Because this account is now closed to you. The color drained from her perfectly made-up face. You wouldn't dare let us lose the house. Think of the scandal. I'm thinking of my son, I replied. And I'm thinking of all the years I let you manipulate me with guilt and shame. Not anymore. She left in tears, but I knew this wouldn't be the end. My parents had spent decades perfecting their manipulation tactics. Sure enough, they launched a full-scale campaign to bring me back in line. First came the flying monkeys, distant relatives and family friends calling to tell me how selfish and ungrateful I was being. Your parents gave you everything, my Aunt Susan lectured. The best schools, the best opportunities. How can you abandon them now? I wanted to ask where these concerned relatives were when my parents were belittling Michael, but I kept my responses polite and firm. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm simply no longer willing to financially support people who abuse my child. Then came the social media assault. My mother posted a tearful update about ungrateful children and the pain of modern family breakdown, carefully crafting herself as the victim. The comments section filled with sympathetic responses from her country club friends, all of them unaware that her designer lifestyle had been funded by her supposedly cruel daughter. My father tried a different approach, showing up at my house late one evening after Michael was in bed. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, his usual arrogance replaced by desperation. The bank is threatening to seize everything, he admitted, slumping in my living room chair. Your mother, she's not handling it well. Yesterday I found her crying over photo albums from when you were little. Remember how close you two used to be? I did remember. I remembered desperately trying to earn her approval, changing everything about myself to fit her impossible standards. I remembered her coldness when I told her about Michael's diagnosis, the way she turned away as if autism was something contagious. I remember everything, I said quietly. That's the problem. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. What if we had separate family events, private dinners with just us, and then larger gatherings where Michael wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable? You mean where you wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable? I corrected him. You're still missing the point, Dad. This isn't about the money anymore. It's about respect, acceptance, and basic human decency. After you left, I sat in the dark living room for a long time, looking at old family photos on my phone. There was one from my high school graduation, me beaming proudly with my valedictorian medal, my parents looking more focused on the camera than their daughter. Another from Michael's 5th birthday, my mother standing stiffly beside him, barely touching him as he tried to show her his favorite toy robot. How had I not seen it before? The constant criticism disguised as concern, the emotional withholding, the way they used money to control everyone around them. My father's visit had made one thing clear. They weren't sorry for hurting Michael. They were just sorry for losing their cash cow. The final straw came a month later at my nephew's birthday party. Grace had invited us, promising to run interference with our parents. Michael was excited to give his cousin the custom-programmed robot he built him. Everything was fine until my mother cornered me by the refreshment table. She'd clearly been drinking, her words slightly slurred as she launched into another guilt trip. We had to sell my grandmother's pearls, she announced loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Family heirlooms, Emily. Do you know how that feels? To sell your heritage because your own daughter. The pearls were fake. I cut her off, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet patio. Just like everything else about your perfect life. She staggered back as if I'd slapped her. How dare you? The pearls were cubic zirconia and glass. I continued, years of suppressed truth finally breaking free. Dad bought them from a costume jewelry store in 1985 when he couldn't afford the real ones. Just like the stories about our family's old money are fake, Grandfather wasn't a wealthy industrialist. He ran a small hardware store in Oakland. The mansion, the cars, the country club memberships. It's all been smoke and mirrors, funded by credit cards and other people's money. The party guests were openly staring now. My mother's face had gone from red to ashen. Emily, stop this at once. No, Mother. I'm done pretending. I'm done enabling your lies. My son, your grandson, is worth 1,000 of your fake pearls and fake friends. He's real, he's genuine, and he's perfect exactly as he is. Michael had appeared at my side, drawn by the commotion. To my surprise, he reached out and took my mother's hand. Grandmother, did you know that fake pearls and real pearls have different thermal conductivity? You can tell them apart by touching them to your front teeth. The real ones feel cool and gritty, while the fake ones feel warm and smooth. It's fascinating how our senses can detect what our eyes can't see. The simple beauty of his observation, delivered without judgment or malice, seemed to pierce something in my mother's carefully constructed armor. She stared at him as if truly seeing him for the first time, her hand trembling in his gentle grip. That moment marked the beginning of a slow but profound transformation in our family dynamics. It wasn't dramatic or instant, real change never is. But something fundamental shifted that day, as if Michael's honest, unconditional way of seeing the world had revealed the emptiness of all our family's pretenses. My parents did lose the mansion eventually, downsizing to a comfortable but modest condo. My mother started volunteering at a local autism support center, initially just to save face with her remaining social circle, but gradually developing a genuine interest in understanding neurodiversity. My father found a part-time consulting job, learning humility and the value of honest work. They're not perfect grandparents now, but they're trying. Last week, they attended Michael's robotics competition, and I saw genuine pride on their faces as he explained his project to the judges. No fake smiles, no hidden criticism, just real emotion, as authentic as natural pearls. Grace and I have grown closer through all of this, our shared experience of breaking free from toxic family patterns, creating a stronger bond than we ever had growing up. She's become Michael's fiercest advocate, always ready to celebrate his achievements and defend him from ignorance. As for Michael and me, we're closer than ever, without the constant strain of trying to fit into my parents' narrow world. We've created our own way of being family. Our home is filled with robotics projects, mathematical equations scrawled on whiteboards, and the kind of unconditional love I always dreamed of as a child. Sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no to those who hurt us, even when, especially when, they're family. By standing up for Michael, I finally learned to stand up for myself. The money I once spent enabling my parents' illusions now goes into a foundation supporting autistic children in STEM programs. Yesterday, Michael asked me if I regret cutting off my parents financially. We were working on a new robotics project together, something about teaching AI to recognize emotional patterns in human behavior. You know how in programming, sometimes you have to debug a system to make it work better. He said, fingers flying over his keyboard. Maybe that's what you did with our family. You found the bugs in the code and fixed them. I smiled, marveling at his insight. That's exactly what happened, sweetheart. And you know what? The new program is running much better now. He nodded, already absorbed back in his work. But I caught the small smile on his face, the quiet confidence of someone who knows they're valued exactly as they are. In the end, that's worth more than all the fake pearls and borrowed luxury in the world.